Greetings, magical mages and spiritual sages. Welcome to Age of the Mage podcast. This is episode 64, and we're going to start discussing ways to leave the matrix. Now, every time I introduce an idea or you first hear from me regarding something, I do want to say that I hope in the future to dive deeper into each idea that I've presented. And so when you first hear a topic on the podcast, then just know that we're going to be going into it more in the future. And when we start out, we'll be at more of the outer layers of the issues, and we'll just work our way down and dive deeper as time goes on. So let's address and introduce this idea of leaving the matrix. And I see a few key things that need to be done for first steps and first ways to do this. I believe that many of you have already done this to some extent. I think that the resonance to the podcast information and myself, and maybe even the Modern Masters Project, that resonance does revolve around leaving some of the systems that would otherwise confine us or constrain us, or might be attempting to persuade us that we are not who we truly are, and things like that. So I believe you as an audience are already doing so many of these things. But in conversations over the last few days, I've noticed that we might be, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and this in itself can cause tension. And also it causes us to not be able to give our full attention to either side. And so we might be, not as productive in our 3D world, and also not as getting as much fulfillment from our multidimensional experiences, because we keep hovering between the two and we second guess ourselves and we doubt, and we all do this. So I believe the very first step that everyone has to take in order to, quote, leave the matrix is to recognize that the matrix exists. And this comes along in its own way, doesn't it? We each kind of have a so-called awakening, or, an aha moment, or a series of events that leads us to really question our whole reality and the framework of that reality and what we're really dealing with within that perceived reality. Yes, and so this is common. And again, I think you that are listening are very well versed in these kinds of incidents and this kind of experience. I think this is right up your alley. So there are many people, though, as we know, family and friends, that are simply unaware that there's anything beyond their five senses, or that the truth about even our 3D world is coming to us from channels of media and other channels that might have agendas on how we perceive that reality. And we might know this, but we watch all the time our dear friends, our dear family, not even begin to realize or detect that there is so much behind the facade and that there's so much going on. And so this is the first step for anybody that might want to lead a different style of life, or start creating a different belief system that would serve them in more multidimensional ways. It is perfectly appropriate for some people to stay within the 3D world and live there and grow there and thrive there. Their soul, that is their soul lesson. That's the pattern they probably came to live out and learn things from. And so this is not in any way to try to persuade someone to leave a comfort zone and something that is fulfilling them, fulfilling for them already. But this topic that I want to talk more about is for those of us who we have that niggle, we have that itch that we want to scratch. We know there's something so much greater than maybe what we've been presented with, and the scenery starts falling away, the set so to speak, and we kind of start seeing beyond that. Now, the challenge with leaving the matrix that I know you're all probably very aware of is that um, you can't you can't go back. You it's difficult once you have stepped out and see things, then it's very difficult to say, "Oh, I'll just jump back in." It's that old, putting the toothpaste back in the tube challenge. So once you see something very clearly and you go, oh, that is not at all how I thought it was, it's very likely you're not going to go backwards and start seeing that as you did before. So this is something to be aware of. And it sounds, oh yeah, I can handle that. It sounds easy. It's not always easy. And what happens as you move away from the masses and the majority thought systems, you face an entirely new challenge. Sometimes you face isolation, sometimes it's persecution, sometimes it can even be threatening for some people who are leading the edge and have very large profiles, for example, online, and they're truth sayers and they take the hits. We see this all the time. But so we have to recognize this, I think. And I know many of you have seen the movie The Matrix, and there's a character in that movie that after seeing the truth, and the truth is so very grim, of course, in that movie, that he wants to go back, just wipe my memory, he wants to return and live inside the matrix where he was blissfully unaware of the truth. So it is a decision point that not to be taken as lightly as probably many do. When we first step off, we aren't aware of all the types of challenges that can accrue by leaving the matrix. So that's the thing to consider is how far do we want to go? How quickly do we want to leave? How much can we handle? And we each know ourselves. I think that some of our tendencies show up even in our own searches. Like, because we know ourselves so well, sometimes we'll only press so far. We'll be diving down some rabbit hole, and maybe our subconscious is telling us, there's going to be things here that's too rough to see right now, or maybe you're not ready to accept this or that. And so one way or another, we stop pursuing that. This often happens. And so we have some built-in buffers and protections, I think, each one of us, um, when we go for these things, there is some kind of guidance system within our own soul that can very often help us, uh, do this in a way that's a little more gentle and not quite as shocking to the psyche. Because if it is revealed all at once, as it was to the main character in the Matrix movie, it's shocking. It takes quite a toll on the person. But in order to even leave, we have to first know there's something to leave. We do have to have a perception that there's something going on that's beneath the surface. There's something more happening around us than our five senses can always define and detect. The second step, I would say, is to choose the systems that you would like to disconnect from. So this goes along a little with what I was just saying, that we may not want to leave the whole thing at once, or it may not even be possible. We may not have the ability without a very traumatic event. I know in some cases, near-death experiences, kind of provoke people to see outside the matrix in such a way that once they return, they're forever changed. And so there are very, very dramatic types of experiences people can go through that just remove them from the whole thing quickly and change their viewpoint over, in just seconds. But for most of us, it's a process. And I would say that we can benefit by taking this a bit at a time and saying, all right, there's something that's out of alignment. Let's say we have to become a little familiar with systems and how systems work. So systems are everywhere, aren't they? They're social systems, political, educational, corporate, and we even have systems in our own body. We have organs and we have various parts of our body that have to work in sync with each other. It's like a system in order to function, in order to keep our body healthy. So that we're surrounded by various types of systems. There's ecosystems, so on and so forth. So we are not going to walk away from all systems, most likely, because they are merely ways that individual components and elements interact, and we need those. Systems can sustain us and can unify individual elements. So it's not a matter of saying, oh, I'm just leaving all systems behind. I'm just going to go be little old me somewhere on an island. It probably is not going to be sustainable. So what we can do is look at things where we feel a misalignment, where we are detecting something here is out of alignment. I am perceiving, a facade here, some falsehood here. There's a gap for me between um, what I perceive as truth and what's being presented. And we can identify systems right off the bat that do that. Okay, so let's say you're in the process of learning more and more about how the world's operating, social, economic, and geographic types of interactions, political, geopolitical things, and you are someone that listens to the news, and over time, other stories are kind of making their way into your field of attention through the internet, and the story you're reading on the internet is not jiving with what you're hearing on a mainstream news channel. This is just an example, but then that puts you in the position of saying, well, which system is right? Is it this network over here that keeps digging up strange issues and diving deep into them, or is it this mainstream system that I've relied on for so long to get my news? And as you work yourself through the process of investigation with that, you will come to your own conclusion. And when that happens, when you find that one of the systems is not serving you because it is not standing in truth, it is perhaps, trying to persuade or convince you of an agenda or a narrative that goes along with an agenda, and you see it, you suddenly get it, you suddenly see that, all right, then it is up to you to determine now what? What's the next step? What do you do? And this is under this second area. Once you recognize there are systems, once you recognize there's such a thing as perhaps a matrix or an illusory type of framework that you'd like to get beyond, the second step is to, start really perceiving and dividing up the systems that make up the larger system and stepping away one at a time, so that it's more comfortable than just this all at once shock. And so let's say in that scenario that I talked about with the two avenues of media, let's say you decide, okay, mainstream media for some reason is not reporting what I think they should be, and I'm feeling out of alignment with them. So then do you keep listening? Do you keep that channel going out of habit? How important does it become to you now that you know there's something out of alignment in that one particular system? How important is it for you to say, I've got to step away from that because it's not good for me, because it is not in alignment? This is this choice point that we all do, and sometimes we just can't. Sometimes we really are getting secondary gains, or we're getting benefits from a system that actually isn't serving us, but it's just not right, or the timing's not there, and we're not quite ready to step away from it. This could happen like in health. We might have a body system that isn't working very well, and it could tie back into a dietary change that we need to make, and yet we just can't do it. We really love our food, we really love what we're eating, and so our brain may know, hey, this system would operate better if I didn't eat such and such, but I just love such and such, and I've got to keep eating it. So there can be transition periods. And what happens is, the stronger a person becomes standing in a dedication to truth, alignment, and light, the harder it will be to accept areas that are misaligned with you. So this choosing how to detach from a subsystem of the overall matrix ties into how strongly you feel about the journey itself. Are you becoming more and more aware of how alignment can really serve you and how it can benefit you in your life? Because as that happens, quite naturally, you will begin to shed the subsystems that are not serving you. You will have the strength to do that. So, leaving behind a negative type of system parallels directly with your own growing strength to stand in your own truth, to respect your personal sovereignty, and to stand in alignment. These two things go hand in hand. You don't really have one without the other. You're not going to start ditching systems that you enjoy on some level or are addicted to or really just are in the habit of, letting into your life, unless you see a flaw there, unless you start recognizing that isn't really healthy or that's not serving me or whatever. And even beyond that, you won't do it until you recognize the importance of doing it. Until this dedication to truth, until this dedication to light, this dedication to alignment, when that really becomes a part of you, and you're just living and breathing that more often than not, that is a turning point, because that will trigger your abilities to start separating yourself from the systems that don't serve you. This can even, this can be seen all over the place, even with relationships. I have friends, and I'm sure many of you do, that we have observed spending a great deal of time and energy in almost abusive situations where their partner is simply not appropriate for them if we're looking at ideas of health and happiness. They might be appropriate in a karmic sort of way. They might be appropriate, in the fact that they're teaching each other lessons. But if we are wishing the best for our friend to live happily and joyously, we might be able to see this partner is just not the one. And yet that person, he or she, has to recognize it themselves, don't they? We can try all we want, we can try persuasion tactics, we can point out things, but until they themselves reach a saturation point, until they say, this is unhealthy for me and my attachment here isn't working because now I have shifted. I am more aligned with myself. I have more self-honor, self-respect, self-regard, and this isn't working. Until that point happens, they don't leave the situation because it's very complex and it's involved on so many levels. So we see this all over. This is human nature, I think, to form attachments and our belief systems become entangled with our attachments. And so we're really asking ourselves to give up some part of our identity, right? At the very bottom line here, sometimes it translates to, hey, I'd give up part of me if I let go of that. So it's not always as easy as it looks from the outside, or it's certainly not easy to work through if somebody who has already done a lot of this is observing someone else working into the first stages. It can seem so much easier to someone that's moved beyond that point, and they just want to advise someone than it actually is. We have to remember and put ourselves back into those early stages and remember how tough it is. Now, for those of us who have already moved past those early stages, we can look more deeply at ourselves and look at additional things that may not be serving us. We may have already left the mainstream narratives. We may have already recognized, the propaganda against magic or spirit, and we've left that. We know the value in it, and we are now walking strongly in our own beliefs and in our faith that's tied to these kinds of things. But we still, are attached to various things that may be prohibiting our growth. And that's for each of us to dig into and find. But that same process that we each went through as we discarded smaller systems that no longer served us, that continues. That just keeps growing and continuing and continuing. And we do find ourselves, perhaps not all the way on the other side of the matrix, perhaps not to the point that someone can reach through more dramatic and severe events happening, but we can find ourselves a long way from our starting point in a much healthier and more realistic position. And that gives us power, that gives us strength, that gives us knowledge, it's tough in one way because sometimes the illusion is just so packaged up so nicely that there's a kind of bliss that goes with, the saying, ignorance is bliss. Sometimes that's the case, but truly, once you are standing in truth and light, I don't know anyone at all that is standing in that position that would give it up. So it may not be the pretty package, but it is so deeply rewarding. It is so deeply nourishing. It is so much more evolved that even though that standpoint and standing in that sphere of knowledge requires more of us many times, we just wouldn't trade it, would we? And so we recognize the system is to be, questioned, right? And then we move to which systems and which parts of the overall system are we willing to let go of? Which ones truly upset us or truly put us out of alignment? And we work through those. And then the third step that really can help all of us keep on this journey, stay true to our truth, stay on this journey of escaping the illusions whenever possible, is to find replacement systems. So again, systems in themselves are not inherently bad. They serve a purpose. They weave together individual elements and provide, you know, planes of existence. They provide dimensions that we can't do with just a singular point sometimes. And so this replacement system, this comes from finding your soul tribe, finding your kindred spirits, connecting with one by one others who are doing similar things. No one will be a carbon copy of any of us. We're not even meant to do that. We're meant to be so individual and so unique and so outstanding, and our destinies weave together. They overlap and they weave together, but they're not identical. And so we have parts of ourselves that will never match 100% to someone else, of course. But when we start calling in through spiritual means, magical means, intentional law of attraction style, anything we have available to ourselves, when we start asking and calling in for others who share some bottom line basic affinities with us, that creates a new system. That creates a new network. That creates the chance for additional knowledge because they may have learned something in their journey that you have not yet learned, and vice versa. And so as you weave together and as you find each other, that's an example of replacing a system that is far more healthy for you and can give you some honest, the things systems are supposed to give us, like our body's systems are giving us life by acting in sync and by acting by flowing smoothly. And so the more we replace the deceptive systems with truthful style systems, the better off everything starts flowing. We can do this, for example, when, let's say, you are deciding to leave major media channels, and all of a sudden there's just like 2 hours every night with nothing to do. Well, you can replace that system with movies that you hand pick, or documentaries or study about magic or study about spirit. There's so much available online that can easily start replacing some of the other programs you may be watching and just feel like these just aren't serving me in any way. And there might be a period of adjustment, but when you find a new replacement that truly feeds your soul, the attraction to it will grow naturally. And it won't take very long before you're not even missing the old system. So habits work this way. Everything works this way. When we know something isn't serving us and we decide to use various methods to leave that, maybe we cut cords, maybe we unravel things, we use various magical ways, we use 3D ways, and we walk away, so to speak, from things that are unhealthy. When we replace those with things that truly feed our souls, it doesn't take long to have a new attraction grow, to have a new fulfilling feeling rise up inside of us. And that really can help. It helps with the vacuum that can sometimes be created by leaving an established system or an established habit. So these are the three places to start, I think, with leaving the matrix. Number one, recognizing that there is something that needs to be examined and questioned and perhaps left, perhaps walked away from, perhaps replaced with something else. The second one is to, once that recognition occurs, narrow down your field a little and start choosing parts of it that you can identify don't serve you, and just practice by leaving those parts. Start there. It's a wonderful place to start. And the third one is to find replacements for those small systems and subsets that you do walk away from. That will fill you back up and help you continue this journey. And it is ongoing. And it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper the more we go. But I wanted to leave these introductory type thoughts with you. And once again, I know so many of you have worked through these. And perhaps this is a good podcast to share with a friend who you feel is starting this journey. And feel free to do that. If it's helpful in any way, that's my hope, that anything I can share will prove uplifting or helpful in some way. I will leave you with this message for today, and we will carry on with many more messages soon, and say goodbye for now.